Okay, so one extra important concept which we also need to address. What is the difference between CI and CD? CI and CD, what's the difference? Or maybe is it the same thing?
We have a hand up here.
Go ahead.
CI usually means that you have a system set up such that every time you push something to your code repository, and make sure that that push doesn't break the repository as it already exists.
Okay.
Make sure that the code is integrating effectively. And then deployment means that every time that integration process succeeds, that code is pushed into production.
Right, you are. You are getting the special thanks from Microsoft for that. So sometimes people like tell CI and mean CD, and sometimes they talking about CD but actually discussing CI. So let's avoid misunderstanding. There are two separate sandboxes for these things, and each sandbox does its own work. Typically, as the colleague here pointed out, they are connected, and this is why we sometimes don't understand the difference between them. What's happening in CI? It takes your source code and then turns it into an artifact. If you ever had the words like, let's build it, let's make build out of it, this is about CI. Then the build is done, CI is done. This is what CI does. CI takes sources and produces builds out of it. And then what's happening here, the continuous delivery service takes the build, unwraps the box, gets a lot of stuff. It will be the whole list of stuff containing in this box. And then using this stuff delivers your application to the cloud. And then you navigate to the URL, you can see your application running there. So Visual Studio and Azure DevOps, they give you both CI and CD. Then you do your project in the Visual Studio team system. This is Azure Welcome project, which I will be showing you. It has a whole bunch of stuff to make you, to organize your work. For example, you can have the same boards which we have in Jira, you can have them here. You can form backlogs, plan sprints, have boards here. And the nice thing is that to the teams up to 5, Azure DevOps is free. So like if you have a small startup, 5 guys trying to build next big thing, it's free for you. Then you have your repos here. And in the repo, you see there are 2 folders actually, application and ARM templates. ARM templates is incredibly interesting thing. This is your network, servers, applications, databases, etc. in one single file, which you can use to replicate your application whenever you want it. For example, I want to hand this application to Jeff and tell like, Jeff, you own it. I will give him access to repo, and he will have an application, and he will have an exact snapshot of my environment. And he can reproduce it in his Azure account like that. We will actually see how it's happening inside the build. And then there is a pipeline. This is the pipeline. You are, here you committed your code. So this is, then you did your commit. The pipeline was triggered. What's happening inside the pipeline? Let's look into it. This is pipelines, and we have builds and releases. So builds, this is which part of the pipeline? CI or CD? Builds. I'm looking into builds. Is it CI or is it CD? Remember that really well. You will most likely encounter this question on the interview. Then the CI ends. CI ends, then the build is done. The primary output of CI stage is build. Then you take the build and release it, deploy it to production. So here you have www bing come. This is release. So it starts this commit, goes through the CI, and then delivered by the CD. What's inside? Inside, if we will look into what's going on, there is a whole bunch of steps happening inside. Oh, I was not showing you stuff. So, sorry. This is pipelines. Those are builds. Those are releases. So builds is responsible for CI, and releases is responsible for CD. And you will see the whole history of your build. Some marked as unsuccessful, some is marked as successful. Inside the build, let's look at what's going on inside the build. You see the nice story of what was happening here. So somebody committed new code, and then build was queued. And then inside the build, you can see what was happening. We got the sources. We initialized the agent who will build this thing. Agent took the code and prepared it for building. Then all the packages required for the application was restored. Then the solution was built, and you can see like all the history. Then the tests were run. Then the debugging information was published. Then all the tests for the application were assembled, and ARM template was copied. And then this thing was handed over to the continuous deployment. What is this ARM template here, which is really interesting thing? If you will look into the Azure portal, I probably time it out. Yep.
The debugging information was published. I don't know what's going on in that step.
Well, in .NET, kind of there is then you run your applications. There are two ways to run it. First one is strictly the executable code, and all the all the references and all the help files and all the variable names, etc. They were translated into the object code. This is the release configuration. And there is extended configuration. There all the names were preserved. All the functions calls are there. All the head strings are there. And then you run your application, for example, on server, and something gone wrong. You can connect debugger to the server and debug it right on the server. For the releases, we typically remove this information because kind of, who knows, who will try to connect to your I think I'm still having connection issues. So, very important thing which worth discussing then you're talking about Agile. Whatever you are doing, whatever organizations you are building, they are consisting of resource groups. Resource groups, it's kind of a virtual entity that combines everything you have created for your application. Databases, servers, templates, whatever you need. And what's the purpose? First, you see that's a whole set of resources that your application uses. databases, applications, log files, etc. So what's the purpose of having a resource group? First of all, a resource group is a container. I can describe the whole resource group, write a snapshot file of this thing, hand it over to you. You will run the AZ create group and then the file name out of it, and you will get all the infrastructure back. So if we will look into the release step here, we will see that this is actually happening. So this is release 11, deployed to staging, and if we will look into it, there is a step here, create Azure resources. And what's actually happening here, it takes my template, which describes all the resources, and deploys it, recreating application. I can wipe it out clean. And it's actually wiped out clean each and every time I deploy, and then redeploy it. What's inside this amazing thing? Let's look into the repo. This is basically a JSON file which says this application needs following resources. It needs a web app. It needs certain application insight extensions. It needs instrumentation. It needs this application plan. It needs, and then there is a bunch of things which you can configure here. You just run the command line tool and you are getting your infrastructure right there. So then you are triggering the build. Actually, you are triggering the steps which we looked into the pipeline. And you can see those things are happening like independently from you. So then you committed the stuff, the magic starts happening. It collects the sources, it starts working the sources, and then kind of it starts deploying the stuff. When this part of pipeline ends, builds artifacts published. So this is the build, which is in the drop container, and it says kind of, I took the source code, I restored all the dependencies, I ran all the tests, and I certify that this thing is deployable. This is the drop file. Take it and deploy it. And then the second part of the pipeline starts. It's called the release pipeline. Let's look what's inside it. It's a nice visual designer, as you see. It says, then the drop happened. Then new build arrived. Take this build and deploy it to staging. It means 6 tasks has to be executed. Let's look into which those tasks exactly are. First one, create Azure resources. And this is the JSON file we saw, right? And then I am telling that the parameters there, those are parameters I want in the file. And for me, it will bake the whole resource group, all the resources created, and deploy my app service there. App service in the zip file, which is basically contains all the build. Then it will update the database, and then it will install the test runner and run all the test assemblies. And among all the stuff which will be happening here, also functional tests will be run, giving me the pretty good chance that I succeeded and everything is fine. And then there is kind of very interesting thing which is called swap slots. So what does it do? It takes staging slot and puts it into production. Any idea what it can be? Okay, in real life, the worst thing that can happen to you is the situation described in this Knight's capital case. And if you think it's kind of 1 in a million chance it will never happen to you, I have bad news. It's called, there is a Murphy law. Murphy law postulates if some bad things can happen to you, it will happen. And at this moment, then you start losing $200,000 every minute. You will give your right hand away to have a way to roll back this thing back immediately, to stop losing 200,000 every day. In the Microsoft platform, straight for this purpose, you have slots. Slots, it's a basically kind of very same application to the latest detail, looking absolutely the same. And then you deploy your release. What is actually happening here, then we deploy web service. We're deploying it to the staging slot. So application kind of consists of two parts, two slots. One is production and one is staging. And I am deploying to staging. And then all this stuff here, configuration, SQL, test, etc., they are performed on staging. And you can even access staging. So for example, if you will type, what was that, Azure welcome staging, Azure websites.com. If I'm not mistaken, that's a URL of application. And I again have connectivity problems, seems like. Give me a second, I'll try right here. Again, my network is lagging. But still kind of, you got the notion. It's kind of a copy of application. It has a slightly different URL if you want to look into it. And everything, all the migrations are done on this slot. And then, and only then, if all the tests have passed, you tell the command, swap the slots. We deployed, everything is okay. We run the tests, everything is okay. We run functional tests, everything is okay. Swap the slots. And if you, at some moment, you realize that something bad has happened, everything you need to do is go here to the application. And there is a button right here. Click it, and you can swap slots back. If something gone wrong, and you realize that you are losing $200,000 every minute, then you just click swap and swap slots back. And you have your old application up and running in the way it was there. So, even more interesting thing which is available for you is that you can use the feature which is called production testing. If you have slots. It's turned off now, but what's the idea? You have deployed, yes?
So I didn't mean to interrupt you in a sense, but back at the tasks, the list of the tasks yet, is that code somewhere as well? We're seeing it in a GUI.
You can edit very same things through the command line. I'm just showing the UI because it's easier to understand that way.
It also is checked into the repository.
Absolutely. Whatever you can do in Portal, you can do from CLI. And there are stuff you can do only from CLI.
Right. So even though we're looking at it in a graphical user interface, it still is code and it's still checked into the repository.
Yep. So like to demonstrate, it's easier to show it in the portal because like you see there the stuff is and like all the parameters at once. But everything is available through the CLI and through the SDK. So for example, from your Python code, you can do the same stuff. Production testing, very interesting thing. So there is staging and there is prod. And you can tell your application, split the traffic. Send 95% of the people to the prod and 5% to the staging. And then you can monitor what's happening on the staging. What does it mean, monitor? What is happening on the staging? There is amazing thing given you like for free, at least at the moment, which is called Application Insights. And it's a complete application monitoring and analytics solution. What's inside? A whole bunch of stuff. First of all, immediately it will show you some basic info. Well, we are not using applications, so there is kind of not that much information available. So let's try last 30 days. And it says kind of, over the last 30 days, we had 0 failed requests, and average server response time was this and that. And the server had like an average 28 requests per something. So basically, it's kind of, it collects all the information happening. And if you are using, for example, MVC core, you don't need even to configure anything. You don't need to call any services. It's just a wrapper around your application. All the exception information, all the details, all the dependencies, all the funnel information will be collected automatically. And
just on the price note, so we don't charge for most of the application insights or logging. We do charge you for the actual storage of those logs, which can eventually add up, but it's really not. It doesn't come up to much.
Yep. And just look at the kind of information is available to you. You can immediately see failures. You can immediately see application availability. You can immediately analyze performance of application and look for bottlenecks. And if there are failures, you can investigate them to see like exactly who was trying to do what and what happened and where it failed and what code was called and what's the context of what's happening there. So basically, it's really easy to troubleshoot. And on top of that, there is a metrics here section. And if you will look into the metrics, there is a nice button, configure alerts. And you can, let's choose our application as a target. I lost connectivity again, sorry. Oh, here is it. So this is all the kind of operations you can monitor for. So basically, then you are deploying your application. You can, before that, you can configure monitoring and see what's going on inside the application. For example, if you are getting events, there's a code starting from 500 something, it typically means you have exceptions. So you can, for example, configure an alert in the application and tell like, if there are action status codes 500 something, tell me immediately. It means application is failing. Somebody is trying to do something which is not there. Or you can tell the application, if, for example, the response time goes above 1 second, let me know. Most likely I have to reconfigure application. So you can put all kinds of analytics right there and get notified immediately about it. And then you deploy your new releases. There is a really good thing which you can do. It's called live metric streams. Oh, sorry. I don't have it for this application, but you're getting the idea from the demo. It will collect metrics in real time. This stuff which you want to monitor in, for example, you deploy extremely important and all brand new release. You configure production testing. You tell like, route 5% of the people to my staging. And then you start monitoring staging. And if you see the errors, you can immediately react and your main user base is not affected. It's kind of 5% of the people, even if they start complaining, you can live through that. And again, these things are available for you out of the box. And even better thing, if you will see at some moment that something is failed, for example, somebody broke the test. you can always uncover what was happening if your network connection is working. So you see, it records all the test runs, all the outcomes, and if something is broken, I broke some tests here intently. So you will see that this one was broken, and this is why it was broken. So you can open it in Visual Studio and see what's going on inside it. And there is an amazing thing which is often called blame tool. For example, it says you that the index method in the home controller was broken. In your Solution Explorer, you can open the code and immediately see what was happening to this controller last time. And even if there are exceptions, it will show you exceptions. And from there, you can go and navigate exceptions which were happening. And so what's here? For example, you look into the index results, and here you will see if you have connection, you will see who have altered, how many changes, what the recent changes are, and who was the last guy who touched the code. So this is why it's called blame tool. So you know how to blame. And these things will end, then the application goes live here, and the slots are changed. And I shown you like the very basic pipeline. You can add much more to that. For example, there is a extension which is called SonarQube, which will analyze the quality of your code. And anybody is taking application security class?
Taking now.
You probably was told that you have at least avoid OWASP 10 top security vulnerabilities in your application, right? It will uncover if you have these vulnerabilities or not automatically. So you just need to run the plugin. It will tell you you have this and that, and not 10 but 25 top vulnerabilities. And also it will uncover all kinds of stuff possible, like SQL injections, possible null pointer exceptions, etc. So it's kind of very, very powerful stuff. And on top of that, there is a kind of nice cherry, which I would love to share with you, is that if you paid attention, I was mostly showing you the C# and MVC core stuff. But if we will go into the portal azure.com, hopefully it will let me in. So this is, by the way, the dashboard of the application I was trying to show you previously when we didn't have a connection. Like, for example, you just went live and you open this dashboard and you will see immediately what's happening. And if there are failed requests, you can see them right here and you can investigate what's going on. So, but even nicer thing is that there is a DevOps projects service right here. And you can add like all the services which I just shown you, all the powerful slots and databases and integration and application insights. If you just don't want to dig into details, you just open DevOps projects and you click add, and then you can build pretty much whatever you want. .NET, Node, PHP, Java, Python, Go, Ruby, whatever you want, or there is kind of 25 other options available. And you just create next, and the whole project with all the resources, all the SDKs, all the repos, all the pipelines, and all the stuff will be brewing for you and ready, available to use. And the cherry which I promised you, there is a program which is called MS Imagine. And inside this program, you are entitled to the free versions of Windows, Visual Studio, some Azure credits, etc., which you can use for free to build your solutions. You just need to log in with your NIU account. It will verify that you are a student, you are eligible to take the part of the program, and it's available for you. You can use it to build your own solutions. That's it.
Thank you, Dennis. So Patrick from Microsoft is going to have a word with us, and then we'll end off.
Go ahead.
Do you need the screen display?
Oh, this is it. Oh, do you want to turn on the lights?
No, not if you're
You
using
turn on the lights.
it.
No,
Oh,
I mean,
okay,
I
right.
was just going to mention, so this is more a presentation that's specific about Azure DevOps product, but we can also just talk about kind of Azure DevOps as a concept.
Yeah, well, we're running low on time.
Running low on time? Okay. I'll just agree then with a lot of what Dennis said. A lot of his stuff is very important. I guess I would ask also kind of like, why do you guys think it's important to kind of know DevOps going into an interview? I'm going to start pointing at people.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I think it kind of makes you more like, if you're saying like in terms of why, like in an interview, it kind of makes you more intelligent versus others in the way how you handle things, not only from a technical point, but like actually implementing it through a product and stuff. Because you can know how to code, but like it's about coding quality.
No, absolutely. There's going to be an aspect to it where people are going to want you to understand the tools that they're using so you can kind of be ready to jump in. But even more importantly, you want to be able to ask the right questions at the interview so you have a good picture of kind of what their process is. You want to be able to ask the right questions to know what they're doing. Not so much just so that they know that you know kind of what's going on, but so that you can actually know, okay, this is kind of what the picture is. This is kind of how working there is going to look like. Because there's different developers. Some people like a less structured environment. Some people like a more structured environment. But you want to know what you're getting yourself into, because you can definitely kind of get yourself in trouble. But just touching a little bit on DevOps. So Azure is a fantastic platform. You've got infrastructure as a service, you've got platform as a service, you've got software as a service, and you've also got functions as a service. Infrastructure as a service is great because it's not just that suddenly you can run a line of code and have your own server running. It's that you can change it. You can dynamically program, okay, this many people are hitting my server. I want to kind of scale it down. I want to scale it up. I want to put more instances in or dial instances down. And you can end up saving a lot of money. So I would just touch on sorry, I know we have to go. I would just touch on even the real quick example that you gave about the pizzeria. It's not so much you're kind of like taking advantage of an existing road. It's that in order to deliver pizzas, you're going to need cars running, right? And you're limited in how many pizzas you can deliver by the number of cars you have running. And all of a sudden, you don't have to put down the money to buy a car. You can just kind of pull up Uber and be like, you're delivering my pizzas right now, and I'm going to keep paying you while you're delivering pizzas. But the moment I don't need you to deliver pizzas, you can go drive for someone else. And it's a really big thing, especially for people that are kind of starting up, creating startups. And I would say, additionally, like even further, you can take advantage of platform as a service where you don't have to worry about the infrastructure. You just publish your project out there, and it's going to be taken care of. You're no longer going to have to worry about the operating system. You're just going to be worrying about your code, and basically that's pretty great. And then additionally, serverless. Another thing I would suggest looking into, because it cuts down entirely on, basically, not entirely on DevOps, but.
So we haven't really discussed serverless. Serverless is a funny thing. A lot of people say, oh, I hate the term serverless. But of course, you're still running on servers, but you're not worrying about what servers you run on. You don't need to ask for servers. You just ask, I need code running. So it's serverless in the sense you're not.
Absolutely. So you're still dealing with servers, but they're no longer kind of servers that you're worrying about. You're not worrying about launching a server. You're just worrying about, this is my code. I'm putting it out here. and I'm only paying for the actual instance that it's running. So those couple of microseconds when somebody hits your site and a page has to be brought up, that's the only moment your code is actually running, and that's the only moment you're paying for. With Platform as a Service, you're still paying for basically the whole time your code is running, and people implement this different ways. So there are Platform as a Service that basically it'll spin up once somebody hits it, and then it'll keep running until people don't hit it for about 15 minutes. But it's still very much that in Platform as a Service, it's still being spun up on a server, and not the same aspect as serverless, where you're only paying for your instance of this is my code running right now. Just touching really quickly on DevOps. This is a new product we have, which is really just a reimagining of the existing product, Visual Team Services. Basically, this is it's a great product for students right now because you can have unlimited repos, private and public. The main thing is that you can only have a team of about 5 people before you start paying. In order to have a team of up to 10 people, you're paying about $40 a month, but you can probably deal with 5 people and share that as you will. And the big thing right now is that if you guys do prefer other things like Jira for management, this is all modular. This used to be a really tied together product. Now you can easily toggle each of these individual services off and only use what you need. But Azure repos, really big that you can have unlimited private public repos. And specifically for public repos, for open source, you can have unlimited build hours. So you can build out on, simultaneously, you can have Linux, Mac OS, and Windows builds going and have unlimited hours. If you're doing private repos, you only have about 1,800 hours a month, which is still, should be a decent amount. But yeah, so that's also a very big factor that now you can build out to all 3 main platforms using this for free. And yeah, I mean, if there's anything else you want me to touch on, I'd love to, but
No,
I don't want to
that's
eat
great.
up your last few moments.
We're running out of time. I would have loved to give you more time, but I appreciate your coming. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay.
Actually, I'm an alumni of this school, so I finished about 4 years ago. If you guys have any questions for me or even want to reach out, let me know. I actually live nearby. And before I joined
We can come
Microsoft,
to your apartment and ask you questions.
probably I've got a nice little common area. Sure, but also like I spent about 2-3 years as consulting for a small company that got bought out.